I'm Ruth Langley, 76 years old, and I'd spent the past 11 months living in my daughter's house in Wilmington, North Carolina. It was supposed to be temporary, just while I recovered from hip surgery. I didn't want to be a burden, but she insisted, and for a while I believed her. I thought maybe this was one of those rare seasons when family drew closer, when you leaned on each other without shame. But then one morning, while the sun poured into her cheerful kitchen, my grandson asked me for $5,000, and before I could finish saying no, Lisa poured a full mug of hot coffee in my lap. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever trusted someone, only to find out you were being handled. I was born in 1948 in a small town outside Knoxville, raised on front porch conversations, and the kind of manners that meant you said thank you, even when your feet hurt from standing too long. My mother was a seamstress. My father worked nights at the paper mill. We didn't have much, but we had enough, and what we lacked in money we made up for. In respect, I carried those lessons with me my whole life, especially after I met Cliff. Cliff was a Navy man, quiet, steady with a laugh that lived in his shoulders. We were married 38 years before cancer took him, and in all that time, we built a life that mattered. 3 children. 2 of them moved away. Lisa stayed. She was always the organized one, efficient, smart, but impatient. When I broke my hip last year, it was Lisa who came to the hospital. It was Lisa who told me I'd come live with her and her son Travis, just until I was back on my feet. The house was newer than mine, 2 stories with white columns and granite countertops. Everything, just so Lisa liked control, and for a while, I didn't mind. It was easier not to argue when my joints ached and the stairs looked too tall to manage. I was grateful. Truly, I told her every day. But things changed slowly, and then all at once, it started with the mail. She said it was easier if it went to her inbox. Less clutter for me, then it was my prescriptions. She insisted on picking them up. Said it gave her peace of mind. After that, she wanted access to my bank just to help manage the bills. I didn't say no, not because I agreed, but because she always asked in that sweet, careful way that made no feel like a betrayal. Then came that morning. I was still in my pajamas, sipping a mug of coffee at the breakfast table. The kind of morning where you think nothing can go wrong. Travis walked in, wearing one of those oversized gaming headsets. He looked right at me and asked if he could use my credit card again. Said there was a setup, he needed something about lights and screens and $5,000. I told him no, firmly, kindly, but no. That's when Lisa walked in. She didn't yell at first. She just looked at me like I was a stranger in her kitchen. Then, without a word, she reached down and tipped the edge of my mug. Coffee splashed over the rim, seared right through the cotton of my pants. I gasped and stood too fast. My hip screamed. The cup shattered on the tile floor. She crossed her arms like she was announcing policy. Either give Travis what he needs or find another place to live. We're not running a charity, she said. That word stopped me. Not the burn, not the broken mug. That one word, charity? I'd paid the electric bill last month. I covered groceries. I never once asked for help with my prescriptions, but none of that mattered to Lisa. Not when I was inconvenient. Not when I said no. I stood there shaking. Wet, humiliated. Travis didn't even look up from his phone. Lisa just waited, daring me to speak. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked to the sink, rinsed my hands in cold water, and told her I'd be gone before sunset. And I meant it. But when I returned to the guest room, the room I used to think of as mine, I discovered something else. Something worse than the sting on my skin. My purse was lighter too, light, and when I checked every pocket, the wallet was gone. No card, no ID, not even my insurance number. I opened every drawer, checked under the mattress, behind the photo frame. Nothing. The account she promised to manage, the paperwork she said she'd handle. It was never for me. It was about access. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Not from pain, but from something else, something I didn't have a word for yet. I looked out the window at the quiet street, and felt the weight of what had been taken. Not just the money, not just the privacy, something bigger. And as I reached for the small notebook where I'd once written down my old bank info, just in case I felt it coming together, she didn't just want my comfort, she wanted control. And by the end of that day, she would find out I hadn't given all of it away. Not yet. The house was quiet after I shut the door to the guest room. My suitcase was open on the bed, clothes folded into careful piles beside it. I'd moved slowly, my hips stiff but manageable. What hurt more than the ache was the silence, the kind that settles when people hear you packing and choose not to ask where you're going. I opened the small dresser drawer where I'd stashed my important documents. Birth certificate, Medicare card, insurance forms. All there, just where I'd left them. I'd kept them hidden under the extra linens more out of habit than fear. At the time, I didn't know why I did it. Now I did. I reached for my purse to check my wallet just to make sure I had everything. The bag was lighter than it should have been. I unzipped the first pocket, then the second, then the side pouch where I usually kept my card. Nothing. I turned the purse upside down, emptying its contents onto the bed. Peppermints, tissues, a folded grocery list, lipstick I hadn't worn in months. No wallet, no credit card, no ID. I sat down slowly. I'd used that card just the day before, at the pharmacy. Lisa had driven me, told me to take it easy on the walk inside. She'd offered to hold my purse. I thought she was being kind. I looked across the room, still as stone. A few months back, Lisa had suggested we make things easier, put all the bills on auto-pay, handle everything from one account. It's simpler, Mom. You shouldn't be worrying about online logins and bank statements. And I'd let her. I'd nodded, grateful at the time for someone willing to help. I walked to the closet and pulled down a shoebox where I used to keep old notepads. I found the one I was looking for, blue cover, torn corner. Inside, toward the back, I'd scribbled down the last 4 digits of my checking account, the routing number, and a few passwords I hadn't used since I handed everything over to Lisa. The numbers were still familiar, but now they felt far away. Back when Cliff was still alive, he'd insisted we keep paper copies of everything. Always have a backup, he used to say. Even if you trust someone with your life, keep your eyes on the details. I hadn't thought of those words in years, but they came back now, clear as ever. I checked every hiding spot I could think of. Inside the Bible tucked in the nightstand, under the mattress. In the jewelry box where I kept my old costume brooches. Nothing. No card. No checkbook. No sign of the banking life I'd handed over in good faith. I sat back down, knees stiff, the kind of tired that goes past your bones. It wasn't just about the missing wallet anymore. I hadn't seen a bank statement in months. Lisa had told me everything was paperless, now said she'd set it that way, so I wouldn't have to bother with envelopes and postage. When was the last time I'd even opened my own mail? I used to go to the bridge club twice a week. Now I couldn't even remember the last time I left the house on my own. She told the neighbors I was too tired, that I needed rest. But I wasn't resting. I was being managed. I picked up the framed photo on the dresser. It was from Lisa's college graduation. She stood in her cap and gown, grinning. I was beside her, smiling. Back then, I thought we were proud of each other. Now, I wasn't sure. The phone buzzed beside me. A text from Gerald. "I'm outside, ready when you are." I didn't answer right away. I took a moment, looked around the room one last time. Then I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Gerald was waiting by the curb in a navy windbreaker, the kind with deep pockets and soft edges. He didn't say anything at first, just took the suitcase from my hand and opened the passenger door. Careful with your hip, he said like always. The car ride was quiet. We passed the same streets I used to walk before the surgery, same grocery store where I used to buy sliced pears and oatmeal. But it all looked different now, smaller, like I'd been watching my life from inside a jar. You know, Gerald said, after a while, eyes still on the road, I saw you crying last week. On the porch. You were holding that little ceramic bird. I didn't want to intrude. I couldn't even remember crying. I must have, though. I figured something wasn't right. He went on. Stopped seeing you at the library. Figured Lisa was making it hard. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. You're not the first, he added. Happens more than you'd think. People get managed right out of their own names, out of their own lives. We turned down a long drive lined with pine trees. Golden Pines Senior Living. That was the name. The sign was simple, just block letters on wood. I'd seen it before years back when I first moved in with Lisa. She said it was too expensive. Said those places were for rich people. Told me not to bother dreaming. But there we were. Inside it smelled like lemon balm and something fresh from the oven. A woman at the front desk greeted us with a warm smile. You must be Ruth, she said. Gerald called ahead. We took a slow tour. There was a small library, a crafts room, even a yoga class going on. The residents looked content, not idle, like people who chose to be here, not people waiting to be collected. We stopped at the koi pond out back. The fish moved slowly like they had nowhere urgent to be. I used to sit by water like this when I needed to think. We didn't say much on the way back inside. In the tea room, someone had left a tray, 2 cups, and a small plate of lemon cookies. Gerald handed me a brochure. I held the cup with both hands, letting the heat warm the chill in my fingers. The brochure was simple. A studio with a kitchenette and a balcony. Month to month. No long-term commitment. Lisa had said places like this weren't for people like me. I stared at the number. Not cheap, but not impossible. I don't know if I can afford this, I said. Gerald reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folder. Then let's find out. But first, we filed the protection order. He laid out the paperwork in front of me. It wasn't just about moving in, it was about taking back my name, my accounts, my life. We didn't need to talk about Lisa. Not yet. Not today. But as I looked at the form, I realized something. She hadn't just taken my card. She'd taken my name off the world I used to live in. And now, I was going to put it back. The next morning, I sat at Gerald's kitchen table with every document I could find. Insurance papers, a folder marked Medicare, 3 envelopes of old bank statements, even the notepad where I'd started scribbling things down the night I packed my suitcase. I hadn't realized how much I'd remembered until it was all in one place. Dates, transactions, things Lisa had said. None of it felt like evidence at the time, but now it did. Gerald flipped through the pages, slowly adjusting his glasses. Recurring charges from stores you've never shopped at. Streaming services, late-night withdrawals, 1 PayPal account that's not in your name. He tapped the edge of the folder. This is a start. I nodded. My hands were steady now. My voice too. I wasn't afraid of what we might find. I already knew what was there. The next step was printing. In Cliff's old study, I still had the dusty Dell desktop and an old printer that groaned when it worked. We scanned page after page until the stack was neat and ready for someone with a badge and a form to take seriously. Later that day, Gerald gave me the number for a financial protection officer, someone who specialized in elder abuse quiet cases mostly. The kind that start with, "It's easier if I handle it for you." Before we made the call, he asked me something. "Do you know who owns the house?" I hesitated. Lisa told me the deed was transferred into her name before my surgery. She said it was for the hospital paperwork. He looked up. Did you give her power of attorney? No, I said. She never asked for that. He leaned back in his chair. Then the house is still yours. If she moved it, she either forged your consent or used confusion to make it seem like you agreed. I sat there for a long moment. That house, the one with the white porch swing Cliff built, the one where I'd watched Travis learn to ride a bike, it wasn't hers. Not legally. Not morally. She's living in a house that belongs to you, Gerald said. We can fix that. We copied everything, notarized what we could. Gerald showed me how to freeze my accounts, anything still linked to Lisa. He told me to document every charge I didn't recognize. I listed them carefully, one grocery order on a Tuesday when I was in physical therapy. A spa payment under her name, a car rental. She'd used my life like it was a tab she could keep open. That night, I sat up scanning until midnight. I sorted each stack into folders, one for the bank, one for the investigator, and one for myself. I labeled them by hand. I didn't care that my writing was shaky. I knew every word by heart. The next day, Gerald reached out to a real estate agent named Carla. She came highly recommended, discreet experience, no appetite for drama. I didn't need anyone flashy. I needed someone who'd get the paperwork done without calling attention to it. We scheduled the evaluation for 2 days later. When the morning came, I didn't go back to the house. I didn't have to. I sat on the small balcony at Golden Pines with a glass of iced tea and the reassessment form in my lap. Carla texted me as soon as she arrived. On site, Lisa just pulled in. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Let the paperwork speak. Lisa called me 5 minutes later, straight to voicemail, then again and again. The fourth time I picked up. Mom, what is going on? Her voice was sharp, brittle around the edges. There's a realtor here. She says you scheduled a walkthrough? I did. There was a pause. You're not serious. I'm very serious. You don't even live here anymore. What is this, some kind of punishment? No, I said. It's a property reassessment. Nothing more. She lowered her voice the way she did when she was trying to sound reasonable. You told me this was our home. No, I corrected. You told me that, and then you told me to leave. The line went quiet for a full 5 seconds, then softer, almost pleading. You're being cruel. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I just said, you only miss me now that I said no. I ended the call. That afternoon, Carla sent her report. Lisa had tried to interfere, but the assessment went ahead. Good resale value, high potential for market listing. She'd follow up with Gerald directly. Gerald called too. She's rattled, he said. She should be. She'll push harder. I know. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of chamomile tea and no television on. The house behind me, the one she thought she controlled, was finally starting to look like what it had always been. Mine. The following morning, a letter arrived at Lisa's address. Certified. Legal seals. Just 1 page. Effective immediately, Lisa Andrews was no longer authorized to access any bank accounts, property holdings, or financial records under the name Ruth Langley. All prior access was revoked. All new activity would be flagged. There was no explanation, no insult, no blame, just boundaries. She called 7 times that day. I didn't pick up. The 8th time, she left a message. Mom, you're listening to him instead of me. Do you even know what you're doing? You're throwing away your family. She used the word like it was supposed to cancel out everything else, like it was a shield. I forwarded the voicemail to Gerald. Then I sat at my desk and wrote a letter of my own. Not to her, to the trust. 1 sentence. All formal communications will go through my attorney. That night, the windows stayed open. The air smelled clean like it does after a storm that didn't quite reach you. I didn't dream of confrontation. I dreamed of peace. I'd told her I'd leave. What I hadn't said was that I wouldn't be leaving empty-handed. I had the house. I had the trust. And for the first time in months, I had a life that no one else was editing behind my back. Gerald stopped by the next morning with a folder under his arm and a box of lemon muffins from the cafe down the road. We sat out on the sun porch at Golden Pines while he laid out the next steps. The trust transfer was nearly complete, and today we'd finalize the documents. He walked me through each line, slowly pointing to where I needed to sign or initial. I read every word. When we reached the last page, he glanced over the top of his glasses. "Once this is filed," he said, "the house and all your assets will be legally protected. Nobody, especially Lisa, can touch them." I picked up the pen. My signature wasn't as neat as it used to be, but it was mine. Cliff would have teased me for how my tongue stuck out when I concentrated. I signed every form carefully, line by line. It wasn't just paperwork, it was a record of who I was and who I wasn't going to be anymore. Afterward, Gerald walked me through the rest of the folder. There was a contact list of financial protection officers, a sheet outlining how to freeze existing accounts, and a letter of intent drafted just in case Lisa tried to contest anything. He handed me a manila envelope of copies for my records and placed another inside a locked cabinet in his study. "Always good to have a backup," he said. Later that afternoon, we met with a financial abuse specialist over the phone. Gerald put the call on speaker, and I sat beside him with my notes. The woman on the other end listened as I explained what had happened, how Lisa took over my accounts, how she told me everything was being simplified, how I hadn't seen a bank statement in months. "Do you have documentation?" the woman asked. "I do," I said. 12 pages. Gerald passed the folder across the table. I heard the woman flipping through the printouts, her voice quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. "You weren't just being used, you were being harvested." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The sound of those words was enough. She gave us a case number and told us to expect a follow-up within the week. From there, any suspicious activity on my accounts would be reviewed under the Elder Protection Statute. Lisa's name was now on the list. When we got back to Golden Pines, I went to my room and pulled out a keepsake box from the bottom drawer of the wardrobe. Inside was a sealed envelope in Cliff's handwriting. I'd seen it for over a year, but had never opened it. The words on the front were simple. "Only when you're tired of pretending you're okay." I broke the seal carefully. Inside was a short note and a personal check. $10,000. Still valid. Still signed by him. I read the note twice. Cliff's words were plain. "If they ever make you feel smaller than the woman I married, don't explain. Just leave, use what's yours. Make sure they can't take it again." I folded the letter back into the envelope and tucked it in the top drawer of my desk. The check I deposited that same day. Not because I needed it, but because I finally understood what it meant. Cliff had known. Maybe not about Lisa, not exactly, but about how quickly a person can lose the life they built when someone else decides to manage it for them. I called Gerald that evening. "I'm ready," I said. "For what? To sell the house and open a trust they can't touch." He didn't ask any more questions. He just said, "I'll draw up the final papers tomorrow." The legal notice to Lisa went out that Friday. It was drafted by the trust's counsel and sent certified mail. There was no anger in it, no blame. Just a formal statement that all accounts and property associated with Ruth Langley were under irrevocable protection. Lisa's access was terminated. By Monday, she knew. She called me 7 times. I didn't pick up. The 8th time, she left a voicemail. Her voice was calm at first, even gentle. "Mom, this is ridiculous. You're letting him turn you against your own family. Do you even understand what you're doing?" Then her tone shifted. "You're throwing everything away over what, a misunderstanding?" She said that word like it should mean something, like it could erase what she did, like it could undo the burned coffee, the missing wallet, the way she told me to get out if I wasn't going to fund her son's hobbies. I forwarded the voicemail to Gerald. Then I opened a drawer, pulled out a blank sheet of paper, and wrote 4 words. Let the paperwork speak. That night, I didn't dream about Lisa. I dreamed about the garden at Golden Pines, about the bench under the willow tree, about sitting there with no phone in my lap, no bills to manage, no one asking me to prove my worth with receipts. 2 days later, Lisa came to Golden Pines. I didn't see her at first. The front desk called my room and said there was a visitor. "Your daughter is here," the receptionist said gently. "Would you like us to bring her back?" "No," I said. "But you can let her know I'm watching." I stepped quietly into the sunroom off the lobby. The glass there was tinted, but you could see out just fine. I stood behind the curtain and watched. Lisa stood near the reception desk, pacing in a tight circle. She wore dark jeans and a fitted blouse, her arms folded and her mouth set hard. The receptionist spoke to her once, then again. Lisa pointed toward the back garden, toward me, though she didn't know it. She looked smaller than I remembered. A few minutes later, security arrived. Not loud, not aggressive, just calm and firm. A woman in a navy blazer walked over to Lisa and spoke quietly. Lisa's hands moved fast as she talked. She pointed again, first toward the ceiling, then at the brochure stand. Finally, she threw up her hands, turned, and walked out. The doors closed behind her with a soft whoosh. I didn't move. Gerald stopped by later that afternoon with 2 glasses of lemonade and a folder of follow-up forms. I told him Lisa had come. He just shook his head. She must have expected someone else to answer the door. She expected the version of me who stayed quiet, I said. He didn't reply. He didn't need to. We sat out in the garden, the ivy brushing against the legs of the bench, the koi pond just in view. The sun filtered through the trees, making the water shimmer like it had its own voice. She didn't get what she came for, I said. No, Gerald agreed, because this time she was on the outside. I reached for his hand. I didn't say thank you. I didn't say anything at all. Some moments don't need words, just space. I woke up early the next morning and opened the window before breakfast. The breeze smelled like rain, even though the sky was clear. From the bench just outside the koi pond, the world looked still. I sipped my tea slowly, letting the warmth rest in my hands a little longer than usual. Inside the library, I had a bookmarked article waiting one Gerald had given me about elder financial abuse. I hadn't planned to read it all in one sitting, but once I started, I didn't stop. Every paragraph sounded too familiar. I was halfway through when the front desk rang my room. "Ms. Langley, there's Elisa Andrews here asking to see you. Would you like us to bring her back?" I set the book down and stood up slowly. "No," I said, "but you can let her know I'm watching." I took the side hallway to the sunroom, the one with the tall windows that faced the main entrance. The glass was tinted but clear enough from the inside. I stood behind a small planter of ivy watching. Lisa was already in the foyer. Tight jeans, red blouse, pacing in circles near the reception desk. She kept looking around impatient, like the very walls had offended her. She was talking to the receptionist, pointing toward the rear of the building, toward the courtyard garden where I usually spent mornings. The young woman at the desk stayed calm, nodding, then motioning for her to wait. Lisa turned sharply, arms crossed, chin lifted. Her face was set in the expression she used when she thought someone had crossed her. She didn't know I was standing 15 feet away, just behind glass she couldn't see through. She tried again. This time, she pointed harder, jabbing her finger in the air, like the building itself was to blame. That's when the security team arrived. Not rushed, not harsh. Just quiet and firm. A woman in a navy jacket walked over, spoke to Lisa, then gestured toward the entry doors. Lisa shook her head and started explaining something. Talking fast hands, moving too quickly to follow. She pointed to the ceiling, then to the stack of brochures, then toward the far hallway where residents passed now and then with walkers and cardigans and folded newspapers under their arms. Anywhere but inward. She stood there another minute, maybe two. Then she turned and walked out. The doors closed behind her without a sound. I returned to the library and sat back down in the same chair I'd left. My tea was cold now, but I didn't mind. The quiet wasn't heavy like before. It was steady. Later that afternoon, Gerald came by. I told him what had happened. He shook his head once and smiled. She came all this way just to be turned around. She expected something different, I said. She expected the version of you who never said no. We walked out to the garden, each carrying a glass of lemonade from the dining hall. I chose the bench I liked best, the one with ivy climbing the back and a view of the pond. The koi were drifting near the surface, slow and careless. Lisa hadn't come for reconciliation. She'd come for access. Maybe control. Maybe an apology she thought she deserved. But she left with nothing. Gerald didn't press the topic. He just sat beside me, his feet planted firmly on the gravel path, one hand resting loosely on the armrest. I looked toward the trees, their branches moving just slightly in the wind. "I'm not afraid of her anymore," I said. He nodded. "That means she's really gone." 2 days later, Gerald called just after breakfast. "It's time," he said. "You still want to sell the house?" "Yes." By the time he arrived with the folder, I had already cleared space on the small desk in my apartment. We reviewed the full deed transfer again, every name, every line. Then came the trust confirmation. Final now. No back doors. No overlooked signature lines. Not even a power of attorney clause. She'd never asked for that. She must have thought she didn't need it. I signed the final page with the same black pen I used for crossword puzzles. The ink moved slowly across the paper, but it was firm. "She's going to come unglued," I said, passing the pen back. Gerald smiled faintly. "Let her. Unglued means exposed. We filed everything that afternoon." Carla, the real estate agent, confirmed the house would be listed discreetly the following week. That evening, I pulled out the journal I'd been keeping. The one with the yellow cover and the creased edges. I had started writing in it the night after the coffee spill. At first, it was just numbers and dates. Then came memories. Things Lisa had said. How she insisted I stop carrying cash. How she redirected all my mail. How she said neighbors stopped asking about me when really I'd later learned she never passed along their messages. 12 pages in all. Some typed, some written by hand. I organized each one into its own folder and made 2 copies. One for the trust, one for the specialist. The next morning, I woke early. Walked down to the dining room just before breakfast service. Picked up a small manila envelope from the front desk, left there by Gerald. Inside was a new copy of the trust paperwork, plus a printed notice that would go out to Lisa the following day. She'd be informed that the house was being listed and that all prior informal agreements were no longer recognized. It was a clean break, no explanations. Later that morning, Marjorie and I sat on the bench near the koi pond. She brought a quilt, the same one we always shared on cool mornings. She talked about the upcoming bridge tournament, about how none of the new ladies shuffled properly. That's when I saw them, Lisa and Travis. Walking up the brick path that led to the front entrance. Lisa's stride was fast, her arms stiff at her sides. Travis lagged behind, hood up, hands in his pockets, that familiar slouched posture that always made him look smaller than he was. They were coming for something, maybe a confrontation, maybe a plea, Maybe just one more attempt to turn things around. Doris, the security guard, noticed them first. She stepped from behind the desk before they reached the door. Calm, steady. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flinch. Just stood there blocking the entrance. Lisa said something pointed toward the back garden. Doris didn't move. Travis spotted me. His eyes found mine through the window. He stopped walking. His shoulders shifted, and for a moment his face went pale. Lisa tried again, raised her voice, said something I couldn't hear, probably my name, but I didn't rise. I didn't wave. I didn't speak. I sat right where I was, one hand resting on the quilt, the other holding my mug. Marjorie glanced at me. Should I call Gerald? No, I said. Let her see me calm. Lisa threw her hands in the air. Travis turned and walked back to the car. Lisa stood a moment longer. Her lips moved once more. Then she followed. The doors stayed closed behind them. Marjorie let out a quiet breath. You didn't even blink. I already said goodbye, I said. They're just now hearing it. 2 mornings after Lisa and Travis were turned away at the front doors of Golden Pines, a white envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. My name written in cursive across the front. I knew the handwriting. I carried the envelope upstairs, set it on the small desk near the window, and didn't open it. Instead, I sat in the armchair across the room with a cup of coffee and watched the koi through the window. They moved without urgency, just under the surface, like nothing outside the water mattered. The letter sat untouched for hours. Later that day, Gerald dropped by with his usual bag of scones and a stack of follow-up documents from the trust office. When he spotted the envelope, he paused. From her? He asked. I nodded. Want me to open it for you? No, I said. I already know what's in it. He didn't push. We went through the documents instead, updated trust forms, a financial review, and contact sheets for 2 elder protection officers who'd been looped into the case. Gerald explained everything clearly in the same steady voice he always used. I signed what needed signing and filed the rest in my drawer. That evening, just before the sun dipped below the trees, I opened the letter. It began with a single word. Mom. Not dear Mom. Not I'm sorry. Just the same word she always used, as though everything between us had never shifted. The first few lines were exactly what I expected. Things got out of hand. I never meant to make you feel pushed aside. I've been under stress. Then by the 3rd paragraph came the real reason she'd written. Travis didn't qualify for the car loan she wrote. We're having a hard time now. Bills are piling up. I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. Enclosed was a check drawn from one of the joint accounts she'd opened under my name. $3,500. In the memo line, she'd written car repairs. I hadn't signed it. My name had been printed, not written. I folded the check once, then again, then a 3rd time, until it fit in the palm of my hand. I walked it downstairs to the front desk and fed it into the shredder without a word. I left the rest of the letter on my desk open. A reminder. Later that evening, Gerald came by again with a small bouquet from his garden. I handed him the letter, minus the check, and watched him read it from start to finish. She still thinks you're a mark, he said quietly. Not anymore. That night, I didn't write in my journal. I didn't have to. The words were already clear. The next morning, the phone rang just after dawn. I was up early again, standing by the window, coffee in hand. It was Gerald. They flagged another check, he said. Same account, same signature. This one was dated 2 weeks ago. I didn't write it, I said. I know. The trust office forwarded it to the bank. They've started a formal review. I sat down slowly. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I knew what this meant. Lisa hadn't just sent a forged check to me. She'd been using the account behind my back even after the notices had gone out. She also left a voicemail with one of the bank reps, Gerald said. Asking for your balance. Claimed she still had oversight. My chest didn't tighten. It opened. They're filing a report, he added. Financial misconduct. Elder fraud. It's going to the investigators today. I didn't speak for a moment. I listened to the wind moving the branches outside the window. You all right? Gerald asked. Yes, I said, because I didn't just walk away from this. I left the door open just long enough for her to trip on her own lies. That afternoon, 2 plainclothes officers visited Golden Pines. Not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, steady presence. They knocked, gently introduced themselves by first name, and asked if I had a few minutes to talk. I offered them seats in the library. One took notes while the other asked about the account. The timeline. When I first noticed things were wrong, I handed them the folder I'd kept highlighted, itemized with every charge I hadn't recognized. The second officer flipped through each page, nodding slowly. You're not the first, Mrs. Langley, he said as they prepared to leave. But you're one of the few who caught it early enough. I almost corrected him. It hadn't felt early, but I let it be. By noon, Gerald called with confirmation. Lisa was officially under investigation for financial exploitation. Travis's name had also been flagged in connection with one of the account transfers. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel guilt either. I walked down to the garden and sat on the same bench under the ivy. The koi moved through the water like they always did, unbothered, slow present. Marjorie joined me an hour later, carrying a warm slice of banana bread and 2 mugs of ginger tea. She'd heard, of course. Everyone had. Not because I'd told them, because they'd seen it coming. The storm, and the way I stayed seated through it. Do you think she'll be arrested? She asked gently. I don't know, I said, and it's not mine to decide. That evening, Gerald and I sat out on the patio. He poured 2 glasses of red wine, just enough to catch the light, and leaned back in his chair. She underestimated you, he said, every step of the way. I underestimated me too. He raised his glass. To recalculating. We clinked gently. Then we sat in silence, letting the breeze move around us. I looked up at the sky, wide and dark and soft at the edges, and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. I was safe. Not just from Lisa, but from the part of me that used to say yes when the answer should have been no. The letter arrived on a Thursday. This time, the return address was typed. The envelope was bulkier than before. Inside was a printed packet, not a handwritten plea. I opened it carefully, laid the pages out on the table by the window, and started reading. Lisa had submitted a formal petition. She wanted access to the trust again, said it was all a misunderstanding, and that her previous actions were taken out of context. She had signed the forms with a notary from a county 2 hours south. The cover letter claimed she'd been unjustly removed from her role as financial overseer and accused Gerald of manipulating me. She attached copies of old birthday cards I'd written her. Notes in my own handwriting, trying to prove I'd entrusted her with everything. She highlighted a line from one of them, I'm so grateful to have you taking care of me. It was dated from the winter after George died, back when I could barely get through a week without forgetting what day it was. The words sat there on the page like they'd been dug up from a time I didn't recognize anymore. I brought the folder to Gerald that afternoon. He flipped through each sheet, slowly pausing at the notary stamp. She's doubling down, he said quietly. She thinks if she talks long enough, she'll wear the system down. He nodded. The trust attorney Eleanor called later that day. Calm voice, matter of fact. She's pushing hard, she said. But she doesn't realize by submitting this, she's now opened herself up to scrutiny across all her past transactions. The investigation had grown. Bank statements were now being pulled not just from my accounts, but from Lisa's personal and business ledgers. They'd uncovered multiple instances of overlapping withdrawals funds transferred to accounts linked to Travis's name, and even one under their oldest daughter using a minor's trust loophole. She knew what she was doing, Eleanor said. This wasn't just messy bookkeeping. By the following week, Gerald received confirmation. A state-level audit had been opened. The family court had also issued a temporary restraining order. Lisa was no longer permitted to contact me directly by mail or phone. All communication had to go through the trust's legal office. That evening, I sat outside with a fleece blanket around my shoulders, watching the sun lower past the pines. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel tired, just clear. The next morning, Marjorie came by during breakfast. She'd made a casserole cheesy and crisp on top, still warm from the oven. I poured her a cup of coffee and told her everything. She didn't say much at first, just listened, eyes steady. Then she said, "You taught her to be strong, but she used it to make herself feel powerful, not protective." I didn't answer right away. The words sat in the quiet between us. "She doesn't know the difference," I finally said. 3 days later, Lisa violated the order. She showed up at Golden Pines. I wasn't there. I was at a doctor's appointment that morning, but the receptionist recognized her and called Gerald immediately. Lisa claimed she was just checking in and wanted to see if her mother needed anything. The front desk turned her away. By the time I got back, the whole building already knew. Someone left a vase of daffodils outside my door. That evening, Gerald and I met with Eleanor in her office across town. She wore a simple navy suit and had a small gold watch on her wrist. Everything about her was quiet, deliberate. She laid out the timeline: Lisa's forged checks, the false filings, the unauthorized account changes. Then came the recommendation. "We can pursue criminal charges," she said. "And there's a strong case for civil recovery as well." She paused. "But that's up to you, Edith." I looked down at my hands. I wasn't shaking. "I don't want her money," I said. "You wouldn't be taking her money," Eleanor replied. "You'd be retrieving your own." That evening, I signed the paperwork. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't retribution. It was restoration. The lawsuit moved quickly after that. Lisa was served at home. A few weeks later, Travis lost his job, something about misreported income tied to one of the false accounts. Their home went up for sale. By summer, it was listed under foreclosure review. I didn't watch it unfold. I didn't need to. Neighbors whispered. Old friends called with questions. I didn't answer most of them. I stayed in the garden. I spent my mornings by the koi pond reading novels with soft covers and dog-eared pages. Marjorie brought over baked apples with cinnamon and sharp cheddar sandwiches on rye. Gerald came by once a week with updated documents and crossword puzzles clipped from the newspaper. Life didn't go back to what it was. It became something steadier. One afternoon in early June, Gerald knocked on my door holding a small manila envelope. "No return address," he said with a faint smile. I opened it on the patio. Inside was a single photograph. Me and Lisa from 20 years ago, standing outside her high school graduation, arms linked. I'd written on the back in blue pen, "You made me proud today. I hope you always know that." No note, no name, just the photo. I didn't cry. I tucked the picture into the drawer next to my bed beneath the reading glasses and hand lotion. Not out of sentimentality, out of completion. That chapter had been written and read. By the time the court issued its final ruling, the trust had been fully restored under my sole authority. Lisa was barred from holding fiduciary control over any elder accounts in the state. The court's language was a blunt pattern of intentional financial misconduct. The civil settlement included restitution and court fees, none of which came from me. Gerald poured champagne in 2 mismatched glasses that night. We toasted under the stars. "To truth," he said. "To peace," I answered. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night without waking. By late summer, the headlines had quieted. The paperwork was filed, the final signatures inked. The legal folders, once heavy on the kitchen table, were now packed neatly in a drawer. I didn't open much. Gerald stopped by once a week with updates, but mostly we just sat on the porch. He'd bring muffins from the bakery near the courthouse. I'd make tea in the old ceramic pot George and I bought on our 30th anniversary trip to Asheville. Lisa never contacted me again. Not directly. Not after the photo. I heard from Marjorie that they'd moved into a rental outside of town, closer to Travis's family. The girls transferred schools. No one made a scene. No one came knocking. It ended with silence, not a bang. There were moments when I'd find myself reaching for the phone muscle memory more than intention. I'd catch myself wondering how Lisa liked her new job, or if she was remembering to wear sunscreen on the kids. But I didn't dial. I knew better now. Instead, I leaned into the life that was still here, present, quiet, and whole. I joined the library's book circle again. We met every other Thursday, same folding chairs, same lukewarm coffee, same gossip about who'd read ahead and who only watched the movie version. One afternoon, we read a novel about a woman rebuilding her life after betrayal. I didn't say much during the discussion. I didn't have to. Marjorie and I took up walking most mornings. Slow loops around the pond past the heron nest and the patch of lilies that bloomed earlier this year than anyone expected. We talked about nothing and everything. Sometimes we didn't talk at all. Just walked. One morning, she stopped and turned to me. "You seem lighter," she said. I looked out at the water. The surface was still except for one ripple from a fish below. "I feel real again," I said. The house stayed mine. The trust stayed under my name. Gerald helped set up a long-term plan so I could live comfortably, safely, and without worry. He added a medical directive too, something George and I always meant to do, but never quite finished. Now it's done. Everything's in order. I kept the garden. That patch of zinnias Lisa once promised to tend never bloomed under her care. But this year, they came up strong. Bright coral, deep red, a few gold ones by accident. I planted them myself. My knees ached and my back complained, but I got them in the ground. The truth is, peace doesn't come all at once. It arrives in moments. A quiet breakfast. A letter unopened. A name you no longer flinch at hearing. It's not forgetting. It's remembering differently. And maybe that's what dignity really is, choosing what to carry forward and what to finally set down. If you've ever had to rebuild trust with yourself after someone close betrayed it, you're not alone. Thanks for spending this time with me. If any part of my story reminded you of your own, feel free to share it in the comments. And if you're ready for more stories like this one, I'd love to have you join me next time.